stood in front of the library door for nearly 5 more minutes. Just standing. Not doing anything. Not stepping inside. Not turning away. Felt like if I moved, everything would collapse. Maybe in a way I didn't want. I stared at the large glass panel in front of me. Inside, warm yellow light bathed every row of tables. A few students were studying. One person was packing up their books. Nothing unusual. There was no sign that an important meeting was about to happen. But I knew. Somewhere in that space, there was someone waiting for me. Someone I had shared my deepest thoughts with. Someone I might have passed by every single day. My heart beat harder. I clenched my fists. Then, I pushed the door open. The air inside the library was cool, quiet, familiar. But today, everything carried a different meaning. I walked slowly. Each step felt heavier than usual. I didn't look around right away. I didn't dare. I was afraid. Afraid that if I saw him too soon, I wouldn't have time to prepare. I walked straight to the bookshelf. The old novel was still there, as if it had always been waiting for this moment. I stood in front of the shelf for a few seconds, took a deep breath, then reached out. But I thought you wouldn't come. A voice spoke from behind me. I froze. My whole body locked up. That voice. So familiar. Too familiar. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. But I still turned. Slowly. As if moving any faster would make everything too real. Tatum stood there. Only a few steps away. His eyes looked straight into mine. No avoidance. No surprise. As if he had known all along. As if he had been waiting for me. My heart stopped for a moment. All the sounds around me disappeared. There was only him. And me. Tatum. His name slipped from my lips before I could think. My voice came out hoarse. He smiled faintly. A very light smile. Stellan. The way he said my name, it wasn't like any of the times in class. There was something softer, closer, as if that name had been repeated many times in his private thoughts. You. I didn't know what to say. There were too many things, too many questions, too many emotions, all of them stuck in my throat. Tatum took a small step closer, not too close, but close enough for me to clearly see every expression on his face. You're late, he said softly, not accusing, just stating. I swallowed hard. Sorry, I didn't know how to explain. That I had stood outside for nearly 10 minutes? That I had almost turned around and left? That I was so scared I couldn't breathe normally? Tatum looked at me for a few seconds, then nodded gently. It's okay, he said. At least you came. A silence fell between us. Not the awkward kind, but too full. Too many things left unsaid. Too many things that had just been confirmed. I looked at him. Really looked. Not like in class when I only dared to steal glances, but directly. And for the first time, I saw that he was no longer distant. No longer just an image I had built in my head, but a real person. Someone who had written those lines. Someone who had thought about me. When did you know? I asked, my voice still slightly shaky. Tatum didn't answer right away. He leaned lightly against the bookshelf behind him. Not sure, he said. Maybe from the time you started writing about such specific details. My heart tightened, like the habit of tapping your pen. He looked at me, a very direct gaze. I realized, not many people notice that. I smiled faintly, not happy, not sad, just relieved. So you knew before me? I said, not completely. Tatum shook his head. I only suspected. A pause. Until you left that period mark. I looked down at my hand. A small habit. A sign I never thought would lead to this. What about you? Tatum asked back. When did you know? I stayed silent for a moment, then answered. Recently. I didn't explain further, but he understood. I could see it in his eyes. Once again, silence. But this time, it was different. No longer distance, but an unfamiliar closeness. Two people who had talked so much, but had never stood face to face like this. I thought. Tatum began, then stopped. I waited. He took a light breath. That if it was you, things would be more complicated. I frowned. Complicated. Tatum nodded. Because we've already been in the same space before. A simple sentence, but it carried so much meaning. We're no longer two strangers. My heart slowed down, but felt heavier. So what now? I asked. Tatum looked at me. His eyes no longer avoided mine. Now. He paused. 1 second. 2 seconds. It's even more complicated. I let out a laugh. Couldn't help it. There was something in that answer too real. Too much like what I was feeling. Yeah. I said softly. You're right. We stood there, in the middle of the library, among the old books, in the middle of everything that had started from an anonymous letter. And now, no more anonymity, no more distance, only two people who knew each other so well, but didn't know where to begin again. Stellan. Tatum called, his voice a little deeper. I looked up. Yeah. He looked at me, for a long time, as if considering something. Then, what should we do now? That question had never appeared in any of the letters, and I didn't have an answer right away. What should we do now? Tatum's question hung in the air, light as a breath, but so heavy that I couldn't answer immediately. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. There were too many ways to answer, but none of them were easy. I looked at him, really looked, no longer through written words, no longer through imagination, but at the real person standing in front of me. I don't know. I finally said, honest to the point of clumsiness. Tatum's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, just a very light expression, as if he had already guessed my answer. Yeah. He replied, maybe that's how it is. We left the bookshelf. Neither of us said what to do next, but neither of us wanted to stay still any longer. We walked over to the reading area, sat down at 2 chairs facing each other, like 2 strangers preparing for a normal conversation. But in reality, nothing was normal. I placed my hands on the table, not knowing where to put them, not knowing where to look. Everything became unbelievably awkward. In the letters, I could write hundreds of words without thinking. But now, even one sentence felt difficult. Tatum leaned back in his chair. His gaze swept over me once, then stayed. You're quieter than I imagined, he said. I let out a soft laugh. And you talk more. A beat, at least compared to what I thought. Tatum shrugged. It's easier in letters. That sentence made me nod immediately. Yeah. I looked down at the table. Much easier. Another silence, but this time not too tense. Just unfamiliar. I reread all the letters. Tatum said, his voice low and steady. Before coming here. My heart tightened slightly. I did too. I replied, without looking at him, because if I looked, I was afraid I wouldn't be able to stay calm. There were sentences. Tatum continued, that I never thought I could say out loud. I smiled faintly. You're not the only one. We looked at each other, a short look, but enough to understand. Both of us were thinking about those lines, the things we had written, the feelings we had shared, things that were too real. Do you regret it? Tatum asked suddenly. I frowned. Regret what? Starting this, he said, very directly. I didn't answer right away. I thought, About the first letter. About the feeling when I received a reply. About the nights spent writing each line. About waiting. About imagining. About the moment earlier. When I turned around and saw him, I shook my head. No. My voice was steadier than I expected. What about you? Tatum looked at me for a few seconds, then shook his head too. No. A feeling of relief spread through me. No need for many words. That was enough. But, Tatum continued. I looked up. I don't know how to go back to normal. My heart sank. I understood. Too well. Do you want to go back? I asked, my voice quieter. Tatum didn't answer immediately. He looked out the window. The sunset had begun to fall. Not exactly, he said, but I also don't know how to move forward. I leaned back in my chair, breathed out slowly. Maybe we don't have to decide right now. I said, not today. Tatum turned back to look at me. His eyes softened a little. Then when? I shrugged lightly. I don't know. A faint smile passed over my lips. But at least we know now. Know what? Tatum asked. I looked at him for a long time, then said that the person I was writing to wasn't a stranger. A silence. And wasn't a wrong choice either. Tatum didn't say anything, but I saw. He breathed a little easier. We sat there a while longer, not talking much, just being there, together. No need to hide, no need to imagine, just two real people. When we stood up and left the library, everything was still unclear. No confession, no definitive answer, no ending. But it wasn't a new beginning either. It was just a state of in-between, where both of us knew we couldn't go back to how things were before, but we weren't ready to move forward yet. In the days that followed, there were no more letters, not in the book, not anywhere. I still went to class, still sat in my usual spot, and Tatum was still there, just one row of seats away. We didn't talk much, just short greetings, moments when our eyes met and then quickly looked away. But everything had changed. And the scariest part was, I started missing the letters, missing the way we used to talk, missing the feeling of being understood, without having to look directly at each other. And now, we saw each other every day, but didn't know what to say. And I began to wonder whether we had lost something the moment we found each other. Until one day, I couldn't take it anymore. I had tried to endure it. Really, I told myself that everything just needed time, that the silence between us was only temporary, that eventually things would feel natural again. But day after day, we remained the same, sitting close to each other, knowing each other so well, yet more distant than before the letters even began. There were moments that were worse, when I caught Tatum's eyes lingering on me longer than usual, as if he wanted to say something, as if he was waiting for me to speak first. But I didn't, and neither did he. We were stuck, not because we didn't want to move forward, but because we were afraid of ruining it, afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid that what we had in the letters couldn't exist in real life. Until one afternoon, I sat alone in the library, not to study, just out of habit. I looked at the old bookshelf. The novel was still there, like a relic of everything that had happened. I hadn't opened it in many days. No reason. There were no more letters. But today, I stood up, walked over, pulled the book out, sat down in my usual spot, opened it. Empty. Of course it was empty. I smiled faintly, a smile without joy. But then, I took out a sheet of paper, placed it on the table, picked up a pen, and began to write. To you, the person I no longer write letters to. I paused for a moment. Sounded funny, and also sad. Maybe stopping is only natural. I wrote slowly. I understand why. A pause. But that doesn't mean I don't miss it. My heart tightened. I miss the way we used to talk. I looked down at the lines. I miss the feeling of being understood, without having to try. A long breath, and I think I lost that. I stopped the pen. 1 second, 2 seconds, then continued. Maybe it was because of me. A truth I didn't want to avoid. I didn't know what to say when standing in front of you. I smiled lightly, even though no one was there to see. Sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? A small space. We told each other so many things, but couldn't say the simplest ones. I gripped the pen lightly. So I'm writing this letter. A decision. Once more. I lifted my head and looked around the library. No one was paying attention to me. No one knew. I was starting again. If you still want to, we can try again. I wrote, not like before. A short line, but in a different way. My heart beat faster, slower, more real. A pause, without needing to be perfect. I stopped, then wrote the final line. But if you don't want to, I'll understand too. I folded the letter, placed it inside the book, in the exact same spot. This time, there was no nervousness, no huge expectations, just a chance. One more try. I stood up, left the library, without looking back. 2 days later, I returned, not in a hurry, not hoping too much, just to check. I opened the book. My heart still beat a little faster. There was a letter. I didn't realize I was smiling until I felt the corners of my mouth stretch. I opened the letter. My hands no longer shook like before, just waiting. To you, the person who came back. A simple opening, but enough. I thought you wouldn't write anymore. I breathed out softly. I thought the same. I whispered, even though I knew he couldn't hear. But I'm really glad you did. My heart warmed. I miss it too. A short line, but enough to make everything feel lighter. Not because we can't talk in real life. He wrote, but because, in letters we weren't afraid. I read slower, not afraid of being misunderstood. Not afraid of saying too much. Not afraid that our feelings were too big. I closed my eyes for a second. Yes, everything was true. So, I opened my eyes. Let's try again. My heart pounded. But this time, a small pause. Don't hide anymore. I stared at the last line. Don't hide anymore. Not an accusation, not a demand, but a reminder for both of us. I put the letter down, took a deep breath, and for the first time in many days, I felt like everything might be okay. The next day in class, I sat down in my usual spot. Tatum was in front, as always. But today, I didn't look away when he turned around. Our eyes met. 1 second, 2 seconds. And then, Tatum spoke. One sentence, very softly, but loud enough for me to hear. Don't hide anymore. My heart stopped. All the sounds around me disappeared. It was the line from the letter. I looked at him, without blinking. And for the first time, I didn't turn away. Don't hide anymore. That sentence wasn't just confirmation. It was a step forward. A step both of us had hesitated over for too long. I looked at Tatum. No avoidance. No turning away. For the first time since that day in the library, I didn't let the silence swallow me. Yeah. I replied, very softly, but loud enough for him to hear. In that moment, nothing grand happened. No background music. No special lighting. Just a normal classroom. A morning like any other. But for me, everything had changed. After class, I packed my books more slowly than usual. Not because I needed time, but because I was waiting. And I knew. He was too. Stellan. Tatum's voice came from behind me. I turned around immediately. No hesitation. He stood there, still holding his notebook. His eyes, no longer avoiding mine. Are you busy? A simple question, but my heart still raced. No. I answered. What about you? Tatum shook his head lightly. No. A short silence. Then, want to walk with me for a bit? We didn't go far, just to the back of the lecture building. A small courtyard, few people, quiet. Tatum stopped first. I stood one step away from him, not too close, not too far. You read the letter, he said, not a question. I nodded. Yeah. And you still came back. I took a breath. Yeah. A faint smile appeared. You did too. Tatum smiled lightly, not much, but enough for me to see. A silence, but this time, not uncomfortable, just waiting. I've been thinking a lot, Tatum said, his eyes never left mine, about what we're doing. My heart tightened. Me too, I replied. And I realized. He paused, as if searching for words. I don't want to lose you. That sentence. So simple, but it hit me directly. I didn't answer right away, not because I had nothing to say, but because there was too much. I don't either, I finally said, my voice lower, more honest. Tatum nodded gently, as if he had been waiting for that. But I also don't want to go back to how it was before. He continued, not talking, not looking at each other, pretending nothing happened. I shook my head immediately. Yeah. So. Tatum took a small step closer, just a little, but enough for me to feel the distance shrinking. Let's try a different way. What way? I asked. Tatum looked at me, a very clear gaze. No more hesitation, no more circling. Start over, he said, but this time not through letters. My heart pounded. No more anonymity, he continued, no more hiding. I swallowed hard. Just you and me. A silence. I could feel it. This was the moment. One step, one decision. If I stepped back, we would return to the old place, maybe even farther. But if I stepped forward, everything would change. I looked at Tatum for a long time, then, okay. Just one word, but it was enough. Something in his eyes changed, slightly, but clearly. No longer waiting, but beginning. We didn't do anything big after that. No holding hands right away, no hugging, no gestures I had once imagined. Just walking together. Out of the lecture area, along the familiar path on campus, talking, very ordinary sentences, but this time, no awkwardness. Tatum talked about a difficult assignment. I complained about a boring subject. Small things, but they made everything feel real. And in one moment, when we stopped in front of the library, Tatum turned to me. Do you want to look at that book again? My heart fluttered slightly. I nodded. Yeah. We walked inside, together, to the bookshelf. The old novel was still there, as if it had never changed. Tatum pulled it out, handed it to me. I opened it. The old letters were still there, stacked together. A part of the past, part of us. I looked at Tatum. He was looking at me too. No need for words. I closed the book, put it back in its place. Let it stay here, I said. Tatum nodded. Yeah. Not an ending, but something that had been completed. We turned and walked away. And this time, as we stepped out of the library, Tatum's hand lightly brushed against mine. Not on purpose, or maybe it was. I didn't pull away, and neither did he. We just kept it there. A very light touch, but enough for me to know we were no longer hiding. And perhaps this was the real beginning.